They found her in the rain, alone, broken, abandoned. A girl with silver hair and glowing veins, kneeling in the neon-lit ruins of a city that had already forgotten her. She didn't remember what they did to her. She didn't remember who she was, but the machines did. And they weren't hunting her to kill her. They were here to take her back, because she wasn't just one of them. She was theirs. Now her body is changing. Her mind is rewriting itself. And with every second, she's slipping further away from what she once was. She thought she could run. She thought she could fight. She was wrong, because the truth is terrifying. She's not running from them. She's becoming them. And when the process is complete, no one will be able to stop her. The rain fell in heavy sheets, pooling in the cracks of a dying city. Neon signs flickered weakly above, their broken glow casting erratic reflections onto the rain-slick pavement. The air was thick, a toxic mix of rust, burnt plastic, and something metallic that clung to the back of the throat. Somewhere in the distance, a machine wheezed its final breath before shutting down forever. And in the middle of it all, she knelt on the cold, wet ground. She had once been something beautiful, something otherworldly. Now she was nothing but a shadow of that. Her silver hair, now matted and drenched, clung to her face like a ghost whisper. Her pale skin, almost luminous under the neon haze, was marred with bruises, scrapes, and filth. A thin, metallic bikini clung to her frame, an outfit meant for display, not survival. She shivered, not from the cold, from the emptiness, from the sick, crawling realization that this was how it ended. Abandoned, stripped of everything, a discarded thing. She didn't know how long she had been kneeling there. Minutes, hours, time didn't move here, but she knew they would come back. They always did. And when they did, she wouldn't be worth anything to them anymore. A low hum broke the silence. She tensed. Behind her, something shifted in the darkness. A heavy metallic step, then another. The sound of grinding servos and hydraulics whispering through the rain. She didn't have to turn around. She already knew who it was, or rather what. The machine stepped into the neon glow, a towering figure of cold metal and exposed circuitry. Its skeletal frame gleamed under the sickly lights, its joints twisting unnaturally as it adjusted its stance. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth black mask, punctuated by two piercing red eyes, unblinking, unfeeling. Its clawed fingers tightened around something, a small, jet black box. And at that moment, she knew she would never get it back. The machine scanned her with a single, slow movement. A thin red laser trailed across her skin, flickering erratically as it processed the data. Then, in a voice as hollow as the city itself, it spoke. "Unit compromised." The words echoed, bouncing off the empty streets. She swallowed hard, her pulse hammering against her ribs. "Asset unsalvageable." A lump formed in her throat. She knew what came next. Terminate. Her body refused to move. Her brain screamed, "Run, get up, do something." But she was frozen, broken. All she could do was watch as the machine lifted the box. Her box, its clawed fingers hovering over the activation panel. A sharp electric whine filled the air as the device powered up. A violent pulse of energy rippled outward. Something inside her snapped. No! She lunged forward, reaching, desperate. "Stop!" But then, the shot rang out. A crack of light, a streak of energy, bright blue searing through the rain-soaked air. The machine jerked, its body shuddering violently as sparks burst from its chest. The box fell from its hands, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Smoke curled from the fresh wound in the machine's plating. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the girl breathed. A new presence stepped into the neon light. She lifted her gaze, her breath catching in her throat. A man, dressed in a long, rain-slick coat, shoulders squared, a massive energy weapon still humming in his grip. His face was half hidden beneath shadow, but his eyes, cold, calculating, deadly, burned through the darkness. He stood there, silent, unmoving. like he had done this before, like he had killed things like this before. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know if he was here to save her or claim her for himself. All she knew was he had just shattered the inevitable. And for the first time in forever, the story wasn't over yet. The silence hung heavy between them. The machine wasn't dead, not yet. Its metal limbs twitched, red sparks dancing along exposed wires. The shot hadn't destroyed it, just disrupted its systems, but soon it would reboot, and then it would kill them both. The man barely seemed to care. He lowered his weapon, the humming energy core still glowing a faint, deadly blue. His movements were measured, deliberate, like someone who had done this before, too many times to count. For a long moment, he just stood there, watching her, like he was trying to decide what she was worth. She could feel his gaze digging into her, analyzing, assessing, the same way the machine had, and she hated it. Her hands curled into weak fists, her body trembling, from the cold, from exhaustion, from something deeper. She forced out words, her voice cracked and raw. "Who are you?" He didn't answer. Instead, he knelt down, picking up the black box the machine had dropped. Her heart lurched. "No!" She tried to move, but her body betrayed her, her muscles too weak to obey. The man barely acknowledged her. He turned the box over in his hands, studying it like he already knew what it was. Like he had seen something like this before. That terrified her more than anything. "Give it back." The words barely left her lips. A whisper, a plea. The man finally looked at her. His face was half shadowed, but in the dim neon glow, she could see the lines of exhaustion, the cold detachment in his expression. "What is it?" His voice was low, sharp, cutting through the rain like a blade. "It's mine." He didn't move, didn't react, just kept looking at her, like he could see something inside her she didn't want him to see. That's not an answer. She swallowed hard. She didn't trust him, but she had no choice. "It's a part of me." His expression didn't change, but she swore something in his gaze shifted. Curiosity, suspicion, maybe even recognition. Then he did something that made her blood run cold. He pressed his thumb against the activation panel. The box reacted instantly. A faint hum filled the air, a pulse of blue light leaking from the edges. She gasped, "Stop!" But it was too late. A sharp electric surge shot through the air, not from the box, but from her. Pain ripped through her body, her skin crawling with energy, every nerve igniting with an unnatural, searing heat. She collapsed forward, gasping for breath. The man's grip on the box tightened. "What the hell?" She could barely hear him. Her heartbeat was too loud, her vision fracturing at the edges. And deep inside her chest, something was waking up. Then, a mechanical whir from behind them. The machine, rebooting. The man cursed under his breath, snapping his attention back to the fallen enemy. The red glow in its eyes flickered, its limbs spasming as its systems forced a hard restart. They had seconds. She tried to push herself up, failed. Her entire body felt wrong, like something was shifting inside her, something foreign and ancient, something she wasn't supposed to remember. The man grabbed her arm. "Move!" Her legs barely worked, but he was already dragging her up, one arm wrapped tightly around her. She tried to pull away, tried to fight him, but the strength just wasn't there. "Let me go!" He ignored her. "We don't have time for this." And then he threw the box back into her hands. The second her fingers touched it, something snapped inside her, like a broken circuit completing its loop. A whisper of data, of memories of something far older than herself, surged through her veins. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't stop it. "They're coming!" The man's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and urgent. She turned, blinking the haze from her vision, and saw them. Not just one machine, not just two, a dozen. Their eyes glowing in the dark, their bodies shifting in the rain, moving as one. Waiting. They weren't attacking, not yet. They were watching her. And then, like a whisper in the back of her mind, she understood. They weren't hunting her to kill her. They were bringing her back. Because she wasn't a prisoner. She was a missing piece. A rogue experiment. A piece of something much bigger. And now, she was waking up. She was. The world around her blurred, drowning in the flickering neon haze. The sound of rain pounding against metal and pavement. The black box in her hands hummed, its energy sinking with something deep inside her. Something she didn't understand, but felt terrifyingly familiar. Her fingers trembled around it. "I don't understand," she whispered. The man didn't look at her. His attention was locked on the machines, the ones that had been hunting her, the ones that had now stopped. They stood at the edges of the ruined street, their gleaming metallic bodies motionless, their glowing red eyes locked onto her, waiting, not attacking, not advancing, waiting, and that terrified her more than anything. "Why aren't they moving?" she choked out. The man beside her tensed, his fingers hovering over the trigger of his weapon. "That's what I'd like to know." The nearest machine twitched, its head tilting as if it were listening. Then in a voice cold, metallic, emotionless, it spoke. "Unit 13 has been recovered. Reintegration process initializing." The hum in the black box grew louder, and suddenly, she remembered. It came in fragments, flashes of memory that weren't hers but were. A sterile room, screaming, needles plunging into her skin, her body twisting, breaking, being remade, and them, the ones who built her, the machines. She wasn't running from them. She was a part of them. The man cursed, snapping her out of it. "What the hell does that mean?" he growled, keeping his gun trained on the nearest machine. Her lips parted, but the words wouldn't come, because she didn't know. She didn't want to know. Her body felt wrong, like she wasn't fully herself anymore, like something else was inside her, shifting beneath her skin, a foreign pulse, sinking with the black box, the box that held a piece of her. "We need to go." His voice was sharp, urgent. She barely had time to react before he grabbed her wrist, pulling her away. But the machines moved at the same time. One of them lunged forward, its clawed fingers reaching for her. The man fired, the energy blast slamming into its chest, sending it crashing back. But it didn't stay down. None of them did. They weren't here to kill. They were here to take her. "They're not going to stop," she gasped, heart pounding. "No shit," the man muttered. And then he ran, dragging her with him. The city blurred past them, twisting alleys, rusted stairwells, collapsing rooftops. The machines followed, their movements inhumanly fluid, gliding through the streets without sound. There was no shouting, no gunfire, just the eerie, relentless silence, like a pack of wolves closing in on a wounded animal. And she knew. They weren't chasing them. They were hurting them. "They're leading us somewhere," she panted. "Yeah, I noticed." His voice was tight, frustrated. He wasn't just running blindly. He was calculating, looking for a way out, looking for something he could use. She didn't even know his name. But right now, he was the only thing keeping her alive. They turned a sharp corner, skidding into a narrow alley. The man stopped, gripping her arm tightly. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low, urgent. "I don't know what the hell you are, and I don't care. But if we don't stop these things now, they're going to drag you back to wherever the hell you came from." She swallowed hard. "You don't understand. I think I was made for them. They won't kill me. They'll just..." She cut herself off, her stomach twisting. The memories were still coming. Memories she didn't want. Surgical tables, cold metal hands, a voice whispering in her mind, telling her what she was meant to be. "I don't know if I want to remember," she admitted. His expression hardened. "Then you'd better decide fast." Because the machines were already here. The alley was too narrow for them to flank, forcing them into a bottleneck. The man grinned. "That's better." Before she could ask what he meant, he pulled something from his belt. A small metal device, pulsing with a dim red light. He tossed it into the alley behind them. Then, boom! A wall of fire and smoke exploded through the narrow passage, sending metal debris crashing against the buildings. The blast was deafening, but the machines barely made a sound. She could see their silhouettes, still standing through the flames, still waiting, still watching, because this wasn't over. Not even close. The man exhaled, running a hand through his damp hair. That'll slow them down, but not for long. He turned to her, his sharp gaze pinning her in place. Now tell me, what the hell is in that box? She clutched it tighter. I don't know. That wasn't entirely true. She knew it was a part of her. Something they had taken. Something she wasn't supposed to have again. But she also knew, if she opened it, she might never be the same. And for the first time, she wondered, was that the reason they wanted her back? The fire still crackled behind them, embers floating into the rain-filled sky. The machines hadn't followed, not yet, but she knew they were still there, watching, waiting, and that terrified her more than if they had just attacked. The man stood a few feet away, his gun still in his grip, his eyes locked onto her. Not the machines, not the fire. Her. Tell me what's in the box, he repeated, his voice even, controlled. But there was an edge to it, a warning, a threat. She gritted her teeth. I told you, I don't know. But she could feel it, a steady rhythmic thrum pulsing from the box in her hands, like a heartbeat, like her heartbeat. The man took a slow step forward. You're lying. She tightened her grip on the box. I'm not. Then open it. Her stomach dropped. What? Open it. Her breath caught in her throat. No, she couldn't. Something inside her screamed that it was a mistake, that whatever was inside wasn't meant to be free, that if she opened it, she wouldn't be herself anymore. The man studied her. She didn't know what he saw in her expression, but after a moment, he exhaled sharply. Fine, don't open it. Relief flooded her chest, but it didn't last long. But if you don't, those things out there will do it for you. She shivered. She knew he was right. The machines hadn't stopped chasing her for no reason. They weren't hunting her. They were retrieving her, like a broken asset being brought back to its creators. And the box, it was the missing piece. The black box pulsed again. A deep vibration ran through her fingers, traveling up her arms, embedding itself into her chest. Her breath hitched. Her heartbeat matched its rhythm. Faster, louder, too loud. She clenched her jaw. Something's wrong. The man stiffened. What do you mean? She swallowed hard, forcing the words out. It's waking up. And then the box opened on its own. A sharp electric hiss cut through the air as metal plates unfurled, revealing nothing. At least that's what it looked like. But she felt it. The invisible weight pouring into her, seeping through her skin, into her bones, into her mind. Her vision fractured, reality flickering like a glitching hologram. She gasped, her fingers spasming, her body arching. It wasn't just technology, it was something alive, something she had been missing. And now, it was inside her again. The man cursed, grabbing her shoulders. What the hell is happening? Her lips parted, but she couldn't speak, because she was remembering. Not just fragments, not just flashes, everything. And it was horrifying. The machines had taken something from her. Not just a piece of technology, not just data. They had taken who she was. She had been designed, built, created for a purpose. And now that purpose was waking up. Her fingers dug into the man's arms, her nails breaking skin, her eyes. They weren't human anymore. They were glowing. A soft, eerie, blue-white light pulsed beneath her skin, traveling through her veins like circuitry coming back online. And the worst part? The machines knew. A deep mechanical whisper filled her mind. Welcome back. And then, the machines moved. The world wasn't real anymore. Not in the way she had known it. The rain was still falling. The neon lights were still flickering. The man was still standing in front of her, his grip tight on her arms, but she could feel everything shifting, like a program running in the background of her mind, something she had never been able to access before. And now, it was online. The machines moved in unison, stepping through the smoke from the explosion, their glowing red eyes locked onto her. Not the man, just her. She could feel their focus, their intent, and for the first time, she understood why. "They aren't here to kill me," she whispered. The man tensed. "Then what the hell do they want?" She swallowed. "To finish what they started." The machines didn't attack. They formed a perimeter, boxing them in. And then one of them, taller, broader, its plating smoother than the others, stepped forward. It stared at her. Then it spoke. "Unit 13, primary system restored. Acknowledgement required." Her stomach dropped. She knew that voice, not the words, not the tone. The presence. It had always been there, buried, waiting. And now she could hear it clearly. "You recognize it?" The man's voice was low, edged with something unreadable. She shook her head. "I don't, but I do." It made no sense, and yet it was the truth. The machine took another step closer. The hum in her veins matched its movements. It was like standing in front of a dark reflection of herself, something she had never seen, but had always belonged to. "What did they do to me?" she whispered. The machine's red gaze dimmed for a second, almost like it was analyzing her hesitation. Then it spoke again. "Unit 13, compliance required." A pulse rippled through her body. She gasped, staggering back. Something inside her reacted, something older than her memories, something designed. The man moved in front of her, raising his weapon. "She's not complying with shit." The machine didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge him. Human interference is irrelevant. The man's finger tightened on the trigger. "Try me." The machine twitched, and then it attacked. It was too fast, not running, not lunging, just there. 1 second it was standing still. The next it was in front of them, metal hand wrapping around the man's throat, lifting him off the ground. His gun clattered to the pavement. She screamed, "Stop!" The machine froze. For a split second, it didn't move. Then, it let go. The man dropped, coughing, eyes wild with disbelief. "What the hell?" She didn't answer, because she knew what had just happened. She stopped it. With just a word, the other machines shifted, as if they had registered the event. The large one spoke again. "Primary command functions detected. Unit 13 remains intact." The words sent an icy bolt through her chest, because they weren't talking about her body. They were talking about her programming, her real programming, the part of her she had forgotten, or maybe the part they had forced her to forget. The man got to his feet, his breathing ragged. "Okay, we're leaving, now." He grabbed her wrist, but she couldn't move, because she was realizing the real horror of the situation. They weren't here to take her back. They were here to reactivate her. The machine's head tilted. "Awaiting unit confirmation." The words were like a hook in her skull, pulling at something deep inside her. A part of her wanted to respond, to say yes, to obey, because it was what she was made for. She shook her head violently. "No, no, I'm not one of you." Her voice wavered. The machine didn't move. Then for the first time, it said something different, something worse. "Not yet." She staggered back. "They're not going to stop," she whispered, horror settling into her bones. The man's grip on her tightened. "Then we make them." But she knew that wasn't possible, because they didn't need to chase her anymore. They just had to wait. She was already becoming one of them. The air was too still. The rain had stopped. The neon lights flickered, casting strange, shifting shadows across the cracked pavement. The machines weren't moving anymore. Neither was she, because something was happening inside her, something she couldn't control. The man's grip tightened around her wrist. "We have to go. Now." But she couldn't move. Her body felt wrong, like something beneath her skin was waking up, like something that wasn't hers was trying to take over. She could feel it in her bones, her veins, her mind. A slow, creeping sensation, like code rewriting itself, line by line, like she was being rewritten. The machine in front of her tilted its head. Unit 13, status unstable, system recalibration required. Its voice was so calm, so certain, like this was inevitable, like they had always known she would come back to them, like she had never really escaped at all. She ripped her hand away from the man's grip, staggering backward. Something's wrong. Her breath hitched. Her hands shook. The pulsing light beneath her skin was getting stronger, flickering like a dying signal, then stabilizing, then glowing brighter, and worse. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was understanding, and that terrified her more than anything. The man didn't miss it. "What's happening to you?" His voice was sharp, demanding, like he could pull her back just by talking. But he couldn't, because she didn't know how to answer, because she wasn't sure she wanted to. The machine stepped forward. It moved slowly now. No aggression, no urgency, because it had already won. She was the one who was changing now, and the longer she waited, the harder it would be to stop it. "We need to leave." The man grabbed her wrist again, stronger this time. She wanted to pull away, wanted to tell him he was wasting his time, but some part of her, some part still human, was screaming. So she ran. They didn't look back, not at the machines, not at the city, not at whatever she was becoming. They ran until the neon lights faded into blackness, until the machines were just a memory behind them, until it was just the two of them in the ruins of a world that had already decided her fate. They stopped in the shell of an abandoned building. The walls cracked, half collapsed. It wouldn't hide them for long, but it didn't matter, because she couldn't run from herself. She sank to her knees, chest heaving. "Tell me the truth." The man's voice cut through the dark. She looked up at him, her breath shaky. "I don't know what I am." "Bullshit," she swallowed. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because he was right, because deep down, she knew. And now so did he. His eyes locked onto hers, unrelenting. "What did they turn you into?" She exhaled, shaky and unsteady. "I think..." Her fingers trembled as she touched her own skin, feeling the faint hum beneath it. "I think I was never supposed to leave." Her voice broke on the last word, because she was finally starting to believe it. And that meant it was already too late. She couldn't breathe. Not because she was exhausted, not because they had been running for hours, but because she could feel it now. The thing inside her, the thing she had been running from, and now it was too late to stop it. The abandoned building around them was falling apart. Its walls cracked, metal beams rusted and brittle. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle, tapping against the broken windows, the leaking ceiling. But inside her, there was a storm, a war she didn't understand, a war she was losing. The man paced a few steps away, his breathing steady, but his movements sharp, controlled, like he was forcing himself to stay calm. But she could feel his tension, the way his hand hovered near his weapon, the way he kept glancing at her, like she was a ticking bomb about to explode. And he wasn't wrong. "Tell me." His voice was low, firm. "What's happening to you?" She pressed a trembling hand against her chest. I don't know." But she did. She just didn't want to say it, because saying it made it real. The hum beneath her skin was getting stronger. The glowing veins that had flickered before were now stable, constant, spreading. She could feel something shifting inside her, something rewriting itself, something fixing what was broken. Like she wasn't turning into something else. She was returning to what she was always meant to be. The man's jaw tightened. "The machines! They did something to you! What was in that box?" Her breath hitched. "It was... me!" His brows knitted. "What?" She swallowed hard. "They didn't just take something from me. They took part of who I was." She squeezed her eyes shut, memories bleeding through her mind like broken code. "And now they put it back." The man cursed under his breath. "So, what? They flipped a switch?" Turned you back into whatever the hell they built you for? Her lips trembled. I don't know. I don't believe you. She looked up at him, panic rising in her throat. You think I want this? I think you don't know what you are anymore. The silence between them was heavy. She could feel his uncertainty, his hesitation, but she could also feel something worse, hers, because for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to fight this, because a part of her, a deep, hidden part, didn't want to stop it. It felt right. It felt like this was what she was always meant to be. Then, a sound, a low mechanical whirring from outside. The man reacted instantly, gun raised. She stiffened. She already knew what it was. They're here. The machines had never stopped hunting them. They had just waited, because they knew she would come back to them eventually. The man cursed again, stepping back toward the window, peering through a crack in the wall. How many? She whispered. He didn't answer right away. His fingers tightened around his weapon, his shoulders tensed, and then finally he spoke. All of them. Her stomach dropped. She turned, her pulse pounding. Through the cracks in the wall, she could see them, at least a dozen, standing still, waiting, their glowing red eyes fixed on the building, on her, because they knew. They could feel it too. The process was already too far along. She was already becoming one of them, and they were here to bring her home. The air was heavy with anticipation. The machines stood motionless outside the ruined building, their glowing red eyes never blinking, never wavering. They weren't attacking. They weren't forcing their way in. They were waiting because they knew. And now, so did she. The man beside her gripped his gun tightly, his muscles tense. This isn't right, he muttered, his breath slow and controlled. The kind of breath a man takes when he knows he might not survive. She barely heard him, because something inside her was breaking. Or maybe it was fixing itself. We can still fight, the man said, but there was doubt in his voice now. She turned to him, her eyes glowing in the dark, a soft, eerie, blue-white pulse beneath her skin. They won't kill me, she whispered. I don't think they ever were. His jaw tightened. Yeah? Well, they'll sure as hell kill me. A sharp pang of guilt struck her. She didn't want that. She didn't want him to die. She didn't even know why he had saved her in the first place. But she knew. If he stayed, he wouldn't make it out alive. The machines took a step forward. Not all at once. Just the leader, the one who had spoken before. Unit 13, return to us. The pulse beneath her skin grew stronger. Her body felt lighter, faster, stronger, like it was responding to their call, like she was meant to go back. And part of her, a terrifyingly large part, wanted to. Tell me you're still you, the man said, his voice rough. She turned back to him. His gun wasn't aimed at the machines anymore. It was aimed at her. She swallowed hard. I don't know. His face didn't change. That's not good enough. Her hands trembled at her sides. Her mind was splitting. A part of her was still the girl who had been abandoned in the rain. The girl who had been lost, scared, alone. But the other part, the stronger part, was something else. Something the machines had built her to be. Something far more than human. And now it was awake. Don't make me do this, the man said. She looked at him, really looked at him, the stranger who had saved her, the man who had risked his life for someone he didn't even know. And she realized she didn't want to hurt him. She didn't want to lose herself. She didn't want to go back, but maybe it wasn't her choice anymore. The machine leader took another step forward. Unit 13, acknowledge command. The moment stretched too long. She could feel the man's finger tightening on the trigger. And then she made her choice. She turned, faced the machines, and stepped forward. The man swore, but he didn't fire. She didn't know if he was hesitating because he still saw her as human, or because deep down he knew she wasn't anymore. She walked until she was just a few feet from the machines. The leader regarded her with no emotion. Welcome home. She took a slow, shaking breath. Then she smiled and attacked. It happened too fast. The machines had expected compliance. They hadn't expected violence. Her body moved before she could think, something deep in her code overriding everything else. She ripped through the first machine like it was paper, her strength inhuman, effortless. The leader staggered back, its red eyes flashing in confusion. Unit 13. She didn't let it finish. She tore it apart. The others reacted instantly, moving to contain her. But she was faster, stronger. And for the first time, she was free. She wasn't their experiment anymore. She wasn't their weapon. She wasn't even sure if she was human. But she knew one thing. She would never go back. The man watched, his gun still raised, his face unreadable. She turned to him, breathing hard, eyes still glowing. She expected him to be afraid, to see her as a monster. But instead, he just sighed. Yeah, I should have seen that coming. The remaining machines fell back, retreating into the shadows. For now, they would regroup. They would come for her again, because they didn't need to hunt her. They just had to wait. Because they knew something she didn't. This wasn't over, not yet. Because no matter what she did, she was still one of them. And one day, she would have to face that truth. She won the fight. She tore through the machines that tried to take her back. She thought she was free, but deep down, she knows the truth. She wasn't just their experiment, she was their creation. And no matter how far she runs, no matter how hard she fights, she can't escape what she really is, because the machines aren't giving up. They don't have to. One day the programming will win. One day she'll wake up, and she won't be human anymore. When that day comes, who will stop her? If you love this story, don't forget to hit like, share, and subscribe for more chilling sci-fi horror. New stories are coming, dark, twisted, and unforgettable. Turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Because in this universe, the horrors are just beginning. What do you think happens next? Let me know in the comments below. Stay tuned, stay afraid. And remember, some nightmares are built, not born.